All right, we are live. Welcome, everyone. This is Monoscene, Christoph from the Colorado Modular Synth Society. I'm hearing a feedback. 1 second. Here we go. Sorry about that. So this is day 3 of the Synth Society Summit, 2021. Day 3 is hosted by the Colorado Modular Synth Society. We had 2 amazing days hosted by the Southern California Synth Society. Traversi and crew did an amazing job. Friday saw a set of amazing performances from electronic music artists, modular and non-modular. Check those out. Saturday, we had a lot of informative and thought-provoking sessions. Again, check those out on the Southern California Synth Society YouTube channel. Today, we have an afternoon full of sessions. Again, we're going to start out with a topic of virtual synthesis. And we're going to kick off our panel with a performance by a local friend here, Modulus 10. Enjoy. All right. Give it up for Modulus 10. He's in chat. Chris Cardone. Awesome performance. Awesome performance. All right. This is the Synth Society Summit Day 3 Virtual Synthesis Panel. I have two awesome guests that I'm going to pull in right now. And one more. Here we go. We have Belle Reid. Sarah is an electronic experimental musician and composer. You might have seen Sarah online and videos on her Instagram integrating trumpets and modular synthesis in various forms. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi, thank you. Hey, everyone.
Sarah's also an educator. She has her own synthesis course, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit here. Then we have Omri Cohen.
Hi.
Omri is a self-described, just a normal, regular guy experimenting like everyone else. Welcome, Omri.
Hi, thanks for having me. Hi, everyone in the chat.
Yeah, welcome. So we will be talking about virtual synthesis today, specifically using VCV Rack. VCV Rack, for those of you who don't know, is a virtual Eurorack synthesis simulator, if you will. It is a software program. It's free of charge, and it has a lot of modules and allows you to really use the same workflow that you would use with Eurorack, physical Eurorack modules, modular synthesizers in virtual form on your computer. So what we will be talking about today is certain aspects of virtual synthesis with VCV Rack. One of those aspects is the educational aspect. So using VCV Rack as a learning tool, an educational platform to explore and to learn about concepts of modular synthesis and modules themselves. That will be Omri Cohen. And then we will be talking about the integration of the virtual synthesis with the hardware world, the outside world. So you go from virtual synthesis to hardware, from hardware to virtual synthesis, and vice versa.
Yeah.
How are you all doing?
Great.
Very good.
Good. It's very exciting to have you here, and we look forward to talking to you. All right, so we will kick things off with Omri Cohen.
Yep.
Omri, do you want to give a little bit of an introduction of what we're about to see?
Well, yeah, basically using VCV Rack as a platform for experimenting and also for learning synthesis in a modular environment, what we call modular synthesis, which is basically synthesis like everything else. And also getting into Eurorack, getting into hardware, learning the different aspects of modular, which modules you might want, which modules you might need, and you didn't even know that you will need them. And also experimenting with modules that exist in hardware, because in VCV Rack there are many modules that are basically sort of clones. They're not, clones as in not as in something that emulating the hardware modules, but the same modules, just virtual in VCV Rack, and most of them are also available for free, which means that it's amazing and it's great for everyone that wants to get into Eurorack to experiment with those modules, to see if you like their features, if you don't like them, and plan your next move in hardware, basically, and save a lot of money, I guess, because money and nerves getting modules that you might not enjoy later on.
All right. Yeah, we'll talk about the money aspect later. Okay, so Omri has prepared a video for us that we're going to play now. And if you have any questions in the chat, post them, and we will talk about the video and educational aspects later after the video, and we'll be able to answer your questions.
VCV Rack is the perfect platform for learning modular synthesis and getting into Eurorack. I'm in the chat, by the way, if you have any questions. Before we start, a short disclaimer. If you are watching this and end up damaging your social life from spending hours upon hours in VCV Rack and or losing money from Eurorack addiction, I'm not responsible. It's not me. And you should see a professional for that. Okay, I asked on Twitter why VCV Rack is the perfect platform for learning synthesis and to start with Eurorack. Those are a few answers I got. When you first open VCV Rack, it's intuitive enough to be a toy, but as you use it and learn its depths, it becomes so much more. And the learning curve is as steep or as shallow as you want it to be. Another one, it removed the cost barrier to finding out if you would enjoy Eurorack. And the ability to save patches is also huge. You can jump right into a complex patch you worked on many months and many projects ago without rewiring and retuning everything. So the first reason why I think VCV Rack is the perfect platform for learning synthesis and to get into Eurorack is, of course, because it's free, which means that you can experiment and see if the modular environment is something you enjoy, is something you can connect with without spending any money. This also means that you can share ideas and ask for help, and it's really, really easy. Because if you find something cool you want to share with other people, you can just send them the patch. Most people will have the same setup as you because, again, VCV Rack is free. Most of the modules available for VCV Rack are free. The same if you need help. You can send your patch to someone that might help you continue the patch or fix a few things in the patch. One example is patchstorage.com. It's a platform for sharing patches of different software. There is a whole segment, a whole section for VCV Rack that you can share your patches, share your ideas, and also ask for help. Another reason is the hardware modules. So there are many virtual versions of hardware modules available, which means that you can experiment with them before you buy it, see if you like them and want them also as hardware, and also plan your setup. You can see which modules you think you will need for your setup, which modules you can connect with and you want them. For example, there are a few examples actually. The Mutable Instruments collection. There are more modules than this. There are many modules for Mutable Instruments available in VCV Rack that you can experiment with. You can learn and you can see if you want them also as hardware. Also, there are some of the modules from Befako. Almost the whole Instruo collection is available in VCV Rack. Again, all of those are available for free, that you can experiment with them whenever you want, also in the middle of the night. Also, some of the Erica modules, Erica synths, also Nano modules, and also the Starling Via, which the modules from Starling Via are really, really deep, and it's really fun to experiment with them in VCV Rack and see if you like them or not. There are more like Supercell from Grayscale, and there are more modules from Grayscale, the Volt modules, all our devices with a lovely, lovely Chronoblob and a few other modules, and also from Music Thing Modular from M80, who brought us this lovely gift to VCV Rack, the radio music module. So again, you can experiment with the modules that are available as hardware and plan your setup, and you can also easily explore patching ideas. For example, if you have your system patched and you want to try something without unpatching things, you just jump into VCV Rack, start a patch, experiment, explore different ideas, and then bring them to hardware. And this brings me also to the next point, to the next reason. VCV Rack is a Eurorack emulation, which means that most techniques will work the same as in hardware, and the information available for Eurorack will work also in VCV Rack. So if you watch a video from DivKit or someone else with a few modules for Eurorack and some ideas, patching ideas, most of the time there's a chance that it will work also in VCV Rack, and the other way around. You can experiment in VCV Rack and then take those ideas into hardware and see how you can implement them in hardware. Now, there are a few things you should be aware of. So VCV can be very, very overwhelming. There are many modules. I myself, I don't have all of the modules, but I have 1,948 modules. This is a lot. So one tip is do not install many collections. Start slowly, start small with just a few collections, take it step by step, try and experiment and learn the basics, the basic modules and the basic aspects of synthesis in a modular environment. And also another really good tip that I have for you is try building a fixed track. Decide you want 1 row, 2 rows, 3 rows, never mind how many HP. Try and build a patch that you can go back to a sort of a template and experiment with and use only those modules for a week, for 2 weeks, for a month, even more. Compose a whole album just with this fixed track. You will learn so much from it, and it will really help you to take your patches to the next level. And here I have such an example. I have here a patch that I built. This is a fixed patch that is, by the way, available in the description. So you can download this patch. I'm talking about this collection of modules here. This here without the reverb, without plateau. Plateau from Valley is a reverb, and I cannot make music without reverb because reverb is life. So I had to add a reverb there, but everything else is available in the file, in the patch that you can again download and experiment with. This patch is perfect for beginners. As you can see, I'm using only the modules that come with VCV, the so-called fundamental collection. And also it's really interesting for advanced users because it's quite limited. As you can see, there are not many modules here. And it's really fun to experiment with and learn new techniques. A few things before we start, I want to go with you through this patch and show you what's going on. So first of all, I added also the Midi to CV module, which means that you can just use a Midi keyboard or a Midi sequencer or whatever to help you with this patch if you want. And also there is the scope that I really recommend using, especially as a beginner, but also as an advanced user. The scope will help you see what's going on. And also the record module from VCV that you can use to record the audio, but also, as you can see here in the right-click menu, you have audio formats, but you also have video formats. It will record your screen so you can share a video on YouTube, on Instagram, and whatnot, if you wish to do so, of course. So what do we have in this patch? We have a sequencer, the sequencer from VCV. It has 3 rows, which is really useful. I have here, or I added here also 2 quantizers. So you can stay either in scale or you can use a quantizer in different ways, like running voices through a quantizer. It can also be interesting. Then 2 oscillators, the VCO1 and the VCO2. And 2 mixers, and this mixer from VCV is also a quad VCA, which is also quite interesting. And then 2 envelopes, 2 ADSR envelopes, 2 filters. Again, everything is from VCV Rack. Then here we have the 8-vert, which is 8 attenuverters, so you can attenuate a signal and also invert it, so you can really change the range of a modulation source, for example. Then we have here some noise, just to add more interest to the sound if you want, or use noise in other ways. The VCV delay module, which is really fun, I have to be honest. And we have the random module, which is a sort of a sample and hold with extra features. And another VCA, because you cannot have enough VCAs. This is the VCA2, this is a dual VCA, so you have 2 sections that you can use. And the octave module, so you can transpose your voices by octaves if you wish to do so. And then 2 LFOs, the LFO2 and the LFO1. LFOs are really useful. And also the unity mixer, which will mix different signals at unity gain, so at the maximum level, and you can get either the sum or the average of them. So again, this is quite a limited patch, but I really recommend exploring it and experimenting with it, especially if you're a beginner, but also for advanced users. And let's see what I did here. So I have here this patch ready with some patch cables, as you can see. So the first thing what I did here, I used the LFO1 to drive the sequencer from the external clock. So basically the LFO1 is our clock in this patch. But I used the gate output of the sequencer to trigger this random module, this sample and hold sort of, and this module is changing or modulating the frequency of the LFO. Again, the LFO is the clock. So what we have here, with each and every step, the rate of the clock, the frequency of the clock will change, and we get this wonky rhythm. Let me already bring in the volume, the voice. So we get a sort of a generative style voice here. The voice itself is coming from the VCO1. I'm sequencing it with the first row of the sequencer, and I'm mixing the saw and the square with this mixer, modulating the pulse width with the LFO. And again, the LFO, the rate of the LFO is always changing. Let's open the filter a bit. And now this is going from the mixer, it's going to the filter, to a low-pass filter, and to the output, to the mixer, and to the reverb, of course, because again, reverb is live. And what I'm doing here, I'm using again the gate from the sequencer to trigger or to gate an ADSR module, an envelope. And this envelope is opening the filter cutoff. But I'm using again this random signal through the 8-vert, so I can use the same signal but invert and offset, not offset, but attenuate it. And I'm using it to modulate the attack and the release. So again, we get, with each step, we get a different envelope, which is again modulating the filter. So it's quite complex, but fun. And we get this sort of generative voice. Another voice I have here, I have the LFO2, so the second LFO. I have it generating pitch information through the VCA here and the quantizer. So I'm quantizing the LFO basically, which is, creates a sort of an arpeggio. And this, I'm also modulating the wave of the LFOs. For the LFO2 and for the VCO2, you can morph between the wave shapes, and I'm doing this with the random voltage, as you can see here, the wave of the VCO2 and the LFO2. And this is going again through a low-pass filter, and this filter basically controls the amplitude also of this voice. So I can bring it in, it's going through a delay, you will hear it in a second. So again, I'm using an LFO to create pitch information, a sort of an arpeggio. And this is sequencing the VCO2, which is going through a filter. You can see the filter is all the way down, the low-pass filter, which means that only very low frequencies are going through, and we do not hear those low frequencies. So basically, we don't hear anything. But when I open it, so again, it's, by the way, another thing I'm doing here, I'm sending white noise to the frequency CV input of the filter, of the second filter. So I'm mixing in the noise, you will hear it again in a second, mixing in the noise but through modulating the filter at audio rates with noise. So let me listen to, try and listen to the crunch. Angry cats. Okay, so again, quite an easy patch, not an easy patch, but quite a simple or basic fixed patch that you can experiment with. Again, go download this patch, experiment with it, and that's it, and have fun.
And we're back. That was excellent.
That's awesome.
Nice.
Thank you, Omri.
Yeah, gladly, yeah.
So that was a really good introduction of using VCV Rack as a learning platform. I dropped some links in the chat to VCV Rack, to the library, and also the patch that Omri is talking about is available from us. Link is in the event description. So I would like to talk about, we talked about VCV as a learning platform, but Sarah, you are using VCV Rack also as a teaching platform. So from the teacher's perspective, can you talk a little bit about your experience with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the class that I teach, the online class, we use VCV Rack as the primary platform. And as a teacher, it's really useful because I can guarantee I focus mainly on the VCV Rack fundamental library, like we saw in Omri's little presentation. But it's amazing how much you can get out of just that collection of so-called basics. And the reason why I love them is because I can guarantee that everyone who's following along has the exact same setup, which is something that would be really hard with hardware. And even though the modules are all so simple, like they do one thing, this oscillator is an oscillator, this filter is a filter. They have different controls that you can manipulate, which is a really nice way to learn. Sometimes with Eurorack modules, they can be, very multifaceted, like instruments almost in one module. And that can be very like a deep end to dive into. So, and you can definitely get into those as well in VCV Rack, but focusing on that fundamental library, you're going to be kind of working with slightly more reduced modules, I guess, which I think just takes away a lot of the overwhelm. Another small note that I'll say is that for me personally, when I was working with hardware at the beginning, I was constantly worried that I was going to break something, like explode a module, light something on fire, plug something in wrong. And VCV Rack's really wonderful because you just can't do that. If you try to drag something into the wrong place, it just won't connect if you're putting like an input into an input. So it's a really nice way to learn without having to stress out about whether you're going to break this very expensive piece of hardware. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially with, I found with kids, where I'm, no, don't put that in there. No, don't plug that in there. So VCV, it's really good and intuitive that way for kids. And people in general. So
yeah, everyone, for sure.
Everyone. Yeah, that's awesome. So tell us a little bit about your course.
Sure. The course, it's called Learning Sound and Synthesis. So it is designed, it's an online semi-synchronous, semi-asynchronous course. So what that means is that there's like 8 kind of chapters that are video lecture based. Omri, by the way, is a guest lecture in one of them. And yeah. And it kind of walks you from, the absolute beginner, never touched a synth, never opened VCV Rack before, through how sound works and why we hear it the way we do. And from that, how we're able to kind of craft it and manipulate it using modular, how to build up patches, how to connect things together. I talk a lot about different approaches to composing music and taking something from like a patch, like a cool sounding patch, into a finished piece. And yeah, and we do I said kind of semi-synchronous because we also do group, basically group coaching calls. They're like feedback sessions where we all come together and chat through problems or questions and listen to music that people are working on, help figure out how to make a patch,
Excellent.
work.
And that's all based on VCV Rack. So you don't have to
100%.
have a Eurorack system.
100%. Yeah.
Okay. That's awesome.
Yeah. That's really important to me because I don't want, it's VCV Rack, as Omri said, it's free. It's the perfect entry point. Yeah. So you don't need to have a hardware system. A lot of people do have like 1 or 2 modules or maybe a keyboard synth, and they have a lot of fun kind of following along and transferring some of those ideas out to their hardware gear as well. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just going to put up the more information here, a promo flyer. Sorry, Omri, covering you up here a little bit. But there's a new session starting in June. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, it's going to kick off in just a few weeks. So if anyone is interested, there's that little link there, soundandsynthesis.com.
Yep, it's in the description, event description too.
Thanks.
For you to
Yeah.
click on it.
Yeah, so that's the best way to stay notified if you're interested to hear more.
Excellent, excellent.
Also, feel free to send me a message anytime too. I'm happy to chat.
Yeah. So contact information, Instagram, and Bandcamp and whatever links for Sarah and Omri are in the event description. So find those links there. So it's an excellent tool for teaching. I also like how you used it almost had a presentation feel to it. Right? You don't have to use another external tool. It's an infinite scroll. So you can have sections of your patch that you can move to and teach people how to do it. When you go to patch storage, sometimes you find a patch that it's just a patch. But then oftentimes people put the time and effort in to really explain what the patch is doing. There's labeling modules. So it's an ever-growing collection of tools.
Yeah. You can write notes even. There's a module you can write notes in. And it's really easy to share ideas and to share, also asking for help. As I mentioned, when you are stuck, you have a patch and you are stuck, you load it to patch storage and you mark it as need help, and people will go and help you. Everyone can open the patch, almost everyone, most of the people can open the patch and just go in and add to it or remove from it or modify it. And it's really easy and it's really fun and it's perfect.
Yeah. And a lot of people, I see a comment here from Mike Berry. I played with VCV Rack for a year before I bought my first module. That was exactly my experience too.
Mine too, yeah.
That's then where it gets expensive.
Yeah.
Right? That's hence the disclaimer that Omri brought up. Very important. Yeah. No, but it's a great way.
You have some idea where you want to go and what you want to achieve, and you are not just shooting in the dark or something. You have already some sort of experience. And again, VCV Rack is an emulation of your rack, so most of the things will work the same as in your rack. So you can really go and experiment, as Sarah said. You don't have to be afraid. You can just go and patch things and experiment. And then if you want, you take it to hardware and you experiment with it further in hardware, like feedback loops and whatnot. That might sound a bit terrifying at first.
Yeah, that was a question that came up yesterday in a panel, to evaluate modules before you buy them. And I think that's important. There is the actual, what you called it, a clone. And I mean, the software is the same. It's the same software that runs on the Mutable Instruments module that's inside of the VCV Rack module. So it's very, 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 very close. Yeah. But for example, what I found, things like logic gates, where, you can get a specific one from a specific manufacturer. But like Sarah said before, the concept of using logic gates for a functional purpose inside of a patch is really something where the brand really doesn't matter. Exactly. And you can really do that and figure that out with VCV Rack.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, totally.
That's great. And here's we talked about Sarah's course, so there is a great testimonial for the course. So that's awesome. All right. We will move on to the next topic that we have. And Sarah, do you want to introduce what we'll be talking about next, or what we're seeing next?
Sure. So basically, I'm going to be showing you some ideas of how I like to use VCV Rack to integrate different instruments that I might have. So this is useful if you're just starting out. Like, let's say you're buying you've got one oscillator, or something like that, and you want to know how to kind of expand that system out to get more modulation, more sound, or you have a keyboard-based synth or something like that. So that's basically VCV Rack as a communication hub.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
And this is Sarah Belle Reid, and today I want to share a few tips and ideas with you about using VCV Rack as a tool to help you build out a hybrid synth setup. In particular, I'm going to focus on how to use VCV Rack as a control and modulation source for Eurorack, using VCV Rack to add effects and to process external audio coming in from hardware synths, and using VCV Rack as a communication hub between multiple different Midi and CV capable synths. So let's get started. So in this first example, I am focusing on just two modules inside of my Eurorack system, which are the Make Noise DPO, complex oscillator, and the Expert Sleepers ES8, which is an audio interface. This interface is going to allow me to connect the Eurorack system over to my computer so that I can send and receive audio and control voltages between the computer and the Eurorack. So what I'm doing here is using the DPO as my sound source, and I'm running 4 of its outputs over into the 4 inputs here on the ES8. Then over on the computer, those 4 sources from the DPO are being routed into these 4 inputs here on this matrix mixer. I'm then taking the 4 outputs of the matrix mixer and sending them back into the Expert Sleepers. So they're coming out here on these outputs, and then I'm sending them back into various modulation inputs on the DPO. So essentially what I'm doing here is creating a big feedback patch within the DPO, and I'm using the 4x4 matrix mixer in VCV Rack as a way of dynamically rerouting and balancing all of the various modulation sources to their destinations. So over here in VCV Rack, I can either manually adjust all of these attenuverters in order to balance which of these 4 inputs are going to which outputs and how much influence they have over them, or I can right click and hit randomize or Command R in order to randomize all of the attenuverters on this module all at once. All right, so as you can hear, using a matrix mixer in this way and creating this feedback loop gives us very noisy and chaotic results, which I personally find super, super fun to explore. But don't forget that you can use this, this kind of setup here to send any modulation source from VCV Rack over to your Eurorack system. So if you're just missing some random voltages or you need a couple of extra LFOs, you can very easily grab those from within VCV Rack and route them to your Eurorack using an ES8. Something else that I really like to use VCV Rack for is processing or adding effects onto sound that is generated from my Eurorack. So in this patch here, I am just running a single output from the DPO into the ES8. That is coming into VCV Rack here, and I'm running it into this convolution reverb. I also thought it could be fun to use a sequencer inside of VCV Rack to give this oscillator a little bit of shape and a little bit of rhythmic variety. So I'm just going to patch the gate output here over into output 3. This is going to come out here on the Expert Sleepers ES8. I'm using that into the strike input here on the DPO. And then I'm going to patch the first row output of the Seek 3 into 4, which is coming out here, and I'm using that in the volt per octave input on the DPO to change the frequency of this oscillator. And from here, we can start to dial in the reverb as well. Now, I'm personally a huge fan of convolution reverbs because you can provide any audio source as the impulse response for the reverb. So in this case, I've actually dropped in a short clip of myself talking from earlier in this video. So when we turn up the dry wet mix here, and now we can adjust some parameters on the DPO as well. Okay, just for fun here, I have swapped out the audio file in this convolution reverb. So now instead of using a recording of my voice, I'm using a short recording of an old grandfather clock. Let's turn this up and see how it has changed. All right, so I think it goes without saying that there is a ton to explore there. You can access so many different types of sounds just based on the settings and what audio you're using in the convolution reverb. So definitely something to play around with. Another thing that's really fun to do is to use VCV Rack as a granular processor for sounds from the Euro Rack. There are a lot of really great granular modules inside of VCV Rack, so unfortunately I can't go over them all, but we can take a look at a quick example here using the supercell. So I'm going to start here with the same patch as before, and I'm just going to slow down my clock here on the sequencer. And I'm going to dial in a little bit of modulation on these various parameters. All right, so the last thing that I want to share with you today is how you can use VCV Rack as a kind of communication hub to connect different pieces of external hardware together. So in this patch, I'm using the zero control to trigger the Hydrasynth. And the module inside of VCV Rack that I'm using for this is the CV to Midi module. So basically, I'm taking this gate output from the O control, running it into the ES8. And then over here on VCV Rack, I am receiving that gate and I'm using it here as the gate input on the CV to Midi module. And you can see here that I have the desktop Hydrasynth selected as my destination. Similarly, I'm taking the top row from the zero control over into the second input on the ES8, and then over in VCV Rack, I am patching that into the volt per octave input on the CV to Midi module. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and start the sequencer so we can hear the Hydrasynth. I'm doing something somewhat similar here with the DPO. I am taking this dynamic output from the zero control and sending that in to modulate the strike on the DPO. And then I'm also taking the row 3 out here and sending that into the volt per octave on the DPO. Now, something else that I'm doing to add a little bit of extra modulation is that every time a new note is triggered on the Hydrasynth, I am also generating 3 new random voltages from these 3 LFOs. And something that's really cool about the Hydrasynth is that you can actually send these values out as MIDI CCs. So I am doing that here in this module called MIDI to CC inside of VCV Rack. I'm receiving these CCs from the desktop Hydrasynth, and then I am sending CC 0, 1, and 2 out to the ES8 here. And then from the ES8, I'm patching those modulation sources over to various parameters on the DPO. Let's take a quick listen to the DPO. Cool. Now let's add these two voices together. All right, that's it for today. I hope you found some of these ideas useful and inspiring to try out in your own patching workflow.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes, I sure did. That was really cool. That was really cool, Sarah. Thank you. There were a lot of neat ideas in there that I hadn't really thought about either. The convolutional convolution reverb, using that with non-reverb wave files. That is pretty cool.
Super, super fun. Yeah.
Yeah, Omri. So I know that you are
pleasure.
also integrating VCV Rack with external hardware. So what is your experience?
So I built a sort of a hybrid setup. And of course, I started small. I had a small case, and I used VCV Rack sort of to fill in the gaps. For example, modulation, LFOs, sample and hold, all sorts of stuff. Instead of having them in the case, which was small, I could save the space, save the money, save the power, and have everything come from VCV Rack. I used the ES9, Sarah used the ES8. Basically, more or less the same thing. You can also use a Midi to CV module that will convert the Midi coming out of VCV Rack into your case. Or you can also use, by the way, you can also use any Midi controller that has CV outputs, that has MIDI in and CV outputs. You can use it as a MIDI to CV converter from VCV Rack, sending MIDI to the MIDI controller and the CV out of the MIDI controller. So basically, it's a great tool also to fill in the gaps and also sending sound sources. Again, if you have a small system, you have a small case, and you don't want to buy anymore, you can use VCV Rack just as the extra. This is how I use it. And also another cool thing is, and this is something that you cannot really find in Europe, is having a modular mixer, a CV-controlled mixer in VCV Rack that you can send. This is basically what I'm doing. Even if I'm not using anything else from VCV Rack, no modulation, no effect, nothing, I still use the mixer because it's voltage controlled, and I just send all of my voices, everything into VCV Rack there. Everything is together in the mixer. I can modulate the panning. I can modulate the send effects if I'm using them. I can create feedback loops with the send and return. I can use each channel as a sort of a VCA even if I want. So basically, I have a full-on voltage-controlled mixer, which is something you cannot really find in Europe, at least not for cheap, and it's not so small also. So VCV Rack is also really great for mixing or voltage-controlled mixing, let's call it.
Yeah.
So this is more or less what I'm doing, also sending for effects. So I have a sort of a hybrid setup.
Nice. How many inputs does the ES9 have?
14.
Inputs?
So from the case into VCV Rack up to 14 channels. So basically either 7 stereo voices, or you can also send CV, of course. It has also a DC blocker, and you can deactivate it. Yeah.
Yeah, I have an ES8. So the ES8 has 4 inputs.
Exactly.
And the question was in the chat, ES8 versus ES9. I think one thing is the number of inputs is higher.
Yeah, so you have 14 inputs that you can send into VCV Rack, and you have also headphone and line outputs.
Very nice.
That you can also use. So you use it basically as your interface for everything.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm just going through the chat. There was a couple of questions. Somebody asked, Sarah Belle Reid, are you active on Trumpet Herald? I'm not familiar with that. Leave us a comment what that is.
Not really, no.
Okay. Travarsi is asking, will these patches be available as well?
Oh, sure.
I think they're fairly easy to recreate too.
They are, but I'm happy to share them. I hadn't
Okay.
prepared that, so I'll figure out a way to make that happen.
If you want to send us the patches, we can zip them up and put them in the event description so people can
Sounds
download
great.
it there. That's awesome. Schmoose is asking, how does one get into collaboration with a module manufacturer or a VCV Module Maker? Most of the module makers in VCV Rack are on GitHub, and you can contact them that way.
Yeah, the community is really open, and also in the forum there's a whole thread about collaborating not only with manufacturers or coders or whatever, but also with designers. If you need a design for your module, there are so many collaborations in VCV Rack. It's crazy. So many modules are born out of a collaboration between designers and coders and programmers. It's really cool.
Yeah, I dropped the link to communityvcvrack.com. That's their online forum.
Yeah.
So Shmusta, that's a good way to get in contact with people if you have module ideas. All right. So any other thoughts you have on either the educational aspects or the integration of VCV Rack in external hardware?
Sarah?
Not really, but go for it. I mean, try it. I think that's the thing.
Exactly. It's free. It will cost you your social life, as I mentioned before, but it's free. Just go and experiment,
Yeah. I think the final thing I'll say is a lot of people do think of it just as a starting point, but I work with these all the time. Like, it's a great starting point, but it's really, really worth to just, carry on, like Omri said, to fill in the gaps, to iterate quickly on a new idea. Exactly. How else can you just grab 10 oscillators all in one go? Bam, bam, bam. Try them out.
Yeah. And you don't have to tune them also. They're already tuned for you.
That's right. Or 200 clouds. Some people have used a lot of rings and clouds, and so that's awesome.
It's definitely worth exploring. Just go for it.
Yes, give it a try. The documentation on the website, check it out. So one note on the patch that we're sharing here. So the patch just contains references to the modules. You have to have those modules in your collection, specifically the plateau and the VCV recorder.
Plateau is not a part of the patch, right. So I just added it because it's Reverb and
it's Reverb Live.
But the record module you will need to install extra, but it's free and it's in the library. You just search for record and it will.
And plateau. There isn't a stock reverb in the module collection from VCV Rack, but if you want one module other than the stock collection, you will want the plateau reverb because it's absolutely awesome.
For sure.
All right, so we're at the end of our show here. The next session is starting right now. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Omri. This was fantastic.
Thank you.
Check out the links to social media and Bandcamps and Sarah's online course that's starting up here in June in the event description, and then hop over to the next session. Go to Colorado Modular Synth Society YouTube channel and check the next session out. Thanks everyone, and bye-bye.
Cheers.